Shalom, and welcome to the Hebrew of Israel. Today's episode is Shem to Abraham, the Patriarchs and Matriarchs Genome. But before we get too deep into the video, first I want to tell you guys about my social media platforms. So I have a Clubhouse account, and we can actually talk to one another on it. I also host Clubhouse rooms every now and then where I might talk about history and genetics of the Middle East and Africa. I have a Twitter page, a Facebook account, and a Facebook page, as well as a Instagram, all titled The Hebrew of Israel. And what I typically do on these platforms is post upcoming videos as well as slides for my presentations. And so just be on the lookout for all of that on my social media platforms. And if you want to support me financially for the channel, you can look at my Patreon as well as my PayPal and my GoFundMe. And with all of that out of the way, let's begin with the video. In order to discover the ethnic ancestry and haplogroup of Abraham, knowing where he comes from is very important. For one, we know that according to the scriptures, Abraham is a Semite because his family's lineage is from Shem. Genesis chapter 11, verse 10 through 26 says, "This is the genealogy of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and begot Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. After he begot Arphaxad, Shem lived 500 years and begot sons and daughters." And then from verse 10 to 26, it says, Arphaxad, Shelah, Eber, Peleg, Ru, Serg, Nahor. Now Terah lived 70 years and begot Abraham. And so as you can see on the right hand side of your screen is the genealogy, just a straight line, a male lineage specifically. Now, furthermore, we know that Abraham was from the city of Ur, according to the scriptures. Genesis chapter 11, verse 31 through 32 says, "And Terah took his son Abram, and his grandson Lot, the son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarah, his son Abram's wife. And they went out with them from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to the land of Canaan. And they came to Haran and dwelt there. So in the days of Terah there were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran." In the ancient world of Mesopotamia, there were two different cities of Ur. You had a city of Ur in Syria, and you also had a city of Ur in Iraq. We're going to focus on the city of Ur that has the best chance of being the Ur of Abraham, not just according to me, but also to biblical scholars and archaeologists. Here is a short video clip covering this very subject. So, copyright disclaimer. The video that I'm about to play, I'm protected under the fair use. I'm using for teaching and scholarship and research purposes. And again, I'm protected under fair use. This is for teaching and research purposes.
Mark Wilson, who wrote the book Biblical Turkey, points out that a previous generation of scholars all thought it was the northern Turkey, the northern Ur in Turkey. And then in 1927, when Leonard Woolley excavated in Iraq and found the great cemetery at Ur, he described the finds as worthy of Abraham. And so the next generation of scholars thought that it was the southern site. And as I've looked at it, I think that there are some good reasons to believe that perhaps the earlier generation had it right, that it might have been the northern Ur. A couple of things. Number one, some of the ancient writers suggest that the Chaldeans, Ur of the Chaldeans actually came from Anatolia and Turkey and migrated south to Mesopotamia at some time. But remember also when when Abraham sent his servant to find a wife for his son Isaac, he said, "Go to my own country, to my own relatives," in Genesis 24. And where did the servant go? He didn't go all the way back to Mesopotamia. What he did was he went to Haran, which is located 24 miles just south of the northern city of Ur. And unfortunately, that site is covered with a city of about 2 million people today. But I would suggest that the city of Ur, the northern city of Ur, is a good place to start with number 10. And number 9 is then the city of Haran. After Abraham left Ur, he settled in Haran for several years before making his way to Canaan. And Tel Haran is located on a fertile plain on one of the tributaries of the Euphrates River. And in ancient times, it was at the junction of some major trade routes. And their excavators there have unearthed some large mud brick structure that dates to the end of the 3rd millennium BC. And some of them believe that it may actually have been a precursor to the temple of Sin. Now, Sin was the moon god that many people in Mesopotamia worshipped, and perhaps even Abraham's relatives, because we're told in the book of Joshua, scripture reports, "Your fathers lived beyond the Euphrates, Terah, the father of Abraham, and Nahor, and they served other gods." Now, if you went to Haran today, the site of Tel Haran, you would see these very famous beehive houses, they're called, these structures that look like beehives. And it's a type of house, a style that's been used for thousands of years in Mesopotamia, but the ones that are at Haran right now have only been constructed in the last 200 years. So that would be my pick for number 9, the number 9 site or discovery related to Abraham.
Yeah, very good. Well, these important locations, people reading their Bibles, they see these locations mentioned, and it's hard sometimes for modern people to, get a sense of the extraordinary importance of these ancient cities. So it's good that we have archaeological evidence that helps to illustrate and to give some context. I know a number of years ago, I went to the University of Pennsylvania. They had an extraordinary display of jewelry from Ur, and I remember how much that helped me. It brought the city to life by seeing all of these different things that had been discovered from Dr. Woolley's excavations there. So anyway, very, very good. So Ur and Haran and these cities are important.
As we can see, scholars support the Ur in the northern part of the Levant, and logic also will indicate that this would be the Ur that Abraham came from. The scriptures tell us everything we need to know. This map shows all the verses as to why Abraham likely came from the northern Levantine Ur. So, of course, when it comes to Ur, Abraham migrates from Ur of the Chaldeans to Haran, the northern view. And Abraham migrates from Haran to the promised land. And as you can see, it's a very closer migration for him to go from the Ur in the Levant rather than going all the way from the Ur in Iraq. It's a lot closer. Furthermore, Eleazar brings Rebekah from Padam Aram to marry Isaac. And when he went there, he went to the area that was in the northern part of Mesopotamia or in Syria, rather than going all the way to Iraq, much like what the Christian archaeologist said in the video. And Jacob also returns to Shechem from Padam Aram, which is in Haran. And so it seems to me that a lot of logic would indicate that this would be the type of region Abraham would have lived in and been from, the northern Levantine Ur. And so, but now let's look into the archaeology of Ur. Who are the people that created the city of Ur? According to some Jewish and Muslim sources, Ur is Ur Kasdim, the hometown of Abraham and grandfather of Jacob, whom God named Israel. The area was part of a network of the first human settlements where the agricultural revolution took place. Because of its association with Jewish, Christian, and Islamic history, and a legend according to which it was the homeland of Abraham, is nicknamed as the City of Prophets. And again, this is the northern is one of the truly ancient cities of the world. And the city began in circa 9000 BCE as a PPNA, pre-pottery Neolithic site located near Abraham's pools. It was part of a network of first settlements spanning West Asia where agriculture began. And just so you know, PPNB, or pre-pottery Neolithic B, is part of the pre-pottery Neolithic, a Neolithic culture centered in Upper Mesopotamia and the Levant. Now here's the kicker. Like the early PPNA people, the PPNB culture developed from the Mesolithic Natufian culture. So it's likely that the people who built would be descendants of Natufians. And as you can see down below is the region of the Natufian culture going from Sinai in the Negev all the way up into Syria. And here is the pre-pottery Neolithic B site, again going from in the Negev all the way up into Syria. So let's learn a little bit more about this era of time. Prior to the adoption of agriculture in Southwest Asia and elsewhere in the world, for that matter, the human triad practiced hunter-gatherer techniques in order to survive. The evolution of agricultural in Southwest Asia generally follows a series of cultural transitions that begin with the Natufians, followed by the pre-pottery Neolithic A, like in and pre-pottery Neolithic B, and then finally the development of pottery itself. The Natufians stand as an important cultural transition because they were the last hunter-gatherers in the Middle East. The Natufians appeared near the Sea of Galilee in what is now present-day Israel. And so again, here is the area of Natufian culture going all across the Levant, from the northern Levant to the southern Levant. Same thing with pre-pottery Neolithic B sites because it's pretty much the same people. And so the Urfa man resembles both carvings at nearby Gillespie Tep and statues found at An Gazelle. Two of these villages have become the nucleus for the major cities of and Haran. So what's interesting about this is, again, and Haran being two famous major cities around the same time period fits with Genesis chapter 11 that Abraham migrates from to Haran. And I'm just going to read what it says. And Terah took his son Abram, and his grandson Lot, the son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarah, his son Abram's wife, and they went out with them from of the Chaldeans to go to the land of Canaan. And they came to Haran and dwelt there. So the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. So it makes a lot of sense for Abram to just migrate to to Haran, and then eventually making their journey all the way to Shechem. These two cities would have existed around the same time in the same region, built likely by Natufians when it comes to And so the Urfa man resembles both carvings at nearby Gillespie Tep and statues found at En Gazelle. Now, what's interesting about this is that En Gazelle is a Neolithic archaeological site located in the metropolitan Amman, Jordan. And when it comes to this region, we actually find very high amounts of haplogroup E. It says Y DNA haplogroup E1B1B1B2 has been found at 75% of the En Gazelle population, along with 60% of the pre-pottery Neolithic B populations, and in most Natufians. So we see this interesting similar cultures both in the southern Levant and the northern Levant, and it's likely that they are the same people. So here is the samples and the region of Amman, Jordan, where we find haplogroup E1B1B, in the time period of pre-pottery Neolithic. And here is a map overlaying the Natufian area of culture and the area in which Abraham would have traveled. He's basically in the Natufian zone. And of course, we know that Natufians are the ancestors of Semites. I seem to come to the conclusion that Abraham's ancestors would have been Natufians. And just to read what this paper says, in Hot Pursuit of Language and Prehistory, this paper makes an additional inference, since there is archaeological and physical anthropological reason to believe that the Natufians were related to modern Semitic-speaking peoples of the Levant. And Natufians had haplogroup E. This is from Paleolithic DNA from the Caucasus reveals core of West Eurasian ancestry, and it reads, such a scenario would also explain the presence of Y chromosome haplogroup E in the Levant, in the Natufians and Levantine farmers, a common link between the Levant and Africa. And this paper is from called Ancient DNA from Chalcolithic Israel, reveals the role of population mixture in cultural transformation. And it says, this findings contrasts with both earlier Neolithic and Epipaleolithic Levantine populations, which were dominated by haplogroup E. So the Levant was dominated by haplogroup E in the Neolithic and the Epipaleolithic, when the city of would have been built. And of course, we can't forget that there are scientists that do say haplogroup E is Proto-Semitic. This is the paper from haplogroup E1b1b by DNA from EUpedia, and it says E-M34 is the main Middle Eastern variety of E1b1b, and is thought to have arrived with the Proto-Semitic people in the late Copper to early Bronze Age. And this is exactly when Semites began to migrate. This is from the Bayesian phylogenetic analysis of Semitic languages, identifies an early Bronze Age origin of Semitic in the Near East, and it says, we estimate that Semitic had an early Bronze Age origin in the Levant, followed by an expansion of Akkadian into Mesopotamia. And this fits along with haplogroup E with early Semites. This paper is called How Eurasia Was Born, and it says the most plausible candidates for Semitic remigration into the Fertile Crescent with TMRCAs fitting the arrival of the Akkadians and other early Semitic peoples are certain subclades of both E-V22 and E-V12 with relatively early TMRCAs present in the Middle East could be candidates for such remigration, such as E-FGC14382 and E-V3262. So early Semites and Akkadians would have had these E markers migrating throughout the Fertile Crescent. And here's just an image of the migration of these early Semites, and beginning from the Levant, going into Mesopotamia, going into the northern Levant, and throughout the rest of the Middle East. And here's a map showing the spread of Semitic languages. Fits perfectly with the spread of haplogroup E from the Levant, going into Mesopotamia, going into Arabia, going into the Horn of Africa. So Abraham likely came from the city of in the northern Levant. This city of was built by pre-pottery Neolithic B Natufians. Natufians are the ancestors of Semites. Therefore, it's highly likely that the Abraham came from was built by his ancestors. Therefore, if of the northern Levant was built by Abraham's ancestors, then Abraham likely was of Natufian ancestry. Since Abraham is a Semite, it's highly likely Abraham's ancestors are Natufians. And with this revelation that Natufians built then I would say yes. If this is the case, then the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, would have haplogroup E. Haplogroup E was among Natufians and Proto-Semitic populations. After all, Jewish populations today are still found to have haplogroup E. Samaritan Levites in Israel Jews who claim descent from King David, Ethiopian and African Jews, Yemeni Jews, Sephardic Jews, Ashkenazi Jews, etc. Looking beyond the geographical patterns, E-M123 is also quite common in many Semitic language communities, including among both Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews, accounting for over 10% of all male lineages. And here's a paper dealing with it even more. Haplogroup E3b1, defined by M78, was found in all 9 populations at frequencies of 10 through 16.7%. The Samaritan family Kohan carries this haplotype. Haplogroup E3b3, defined by M123, was present at 5 to 20% in Ethiopian, Ashkenazi, Libyan, and Yemenite Jews, and in Palestinians. And so famously, Albert Einstein actually had haplogroup E. Albert Einstein is presumed to have belonged to wide haplogroup E-Z38, descent of Naphtali. Approximately 20% of Ashkenazi Jews belong to haplogroup E1b1b. Adolf Hitler even had haplogroup E1b1b, and of course haplogroup E is often associated with the origins of Semitic languages, which also includes Semitic people. And so E-M215 and E-M35 are quite common among Afroasiatic speakers. The linguistic group and carriers of E-M35 lineage have a high probability to have arisen and dispersed together from the Afroasiatic homeland. Amongst populations with an Afroasiatic speaking history, a significant portion of Jewish male lineages are E-M35. Haplogroup E-M35, which accounts for approximately 18% to 20% of Ashkenazi and 8.6% to 30% of the Sephardi Y chromosomes, appears to be one of the major founding lineages of the Jewish population. And that's very powerful. Haplogroup E may be one of the major founding lineages of Jewish people. Furthermore, this E-Z830, this is a recent discovery subclade which has not yet been included in most haplogroup trees. E-Z830 includes the confirmed subclades of E-M123, E-V15, which includes E-M293, E-V42, E-V6, E-V92, and E-Z830, and is a sibling clade to E-L19. Currently, the E-M35 phylogeny project recognizes 4 distinct clusters of Z830 carriers, 2 of which are exclusively Jewish in origin. And so here are the ones that are exclusively Jewish. It is E-PF1975. This cluster is now characterized by SNP-PF1975. Formerly, this was known as cluster E-Z830A Jewish cluster. And then you have E-PF152. This cluster is now characterized by SNP-PF1952. Formerly, this was known as cluster E-Z830B Jewish cluster. And here's a paper dealing with the percentages of haplogroup E among Jewish, Ashkenazi, and Sephardic Jewish populations. It's basically in Jewish population, Ashkenazi populations at 18.2%, and Sephardic Jewish populations at 30%. And so here is a test, as a paper as well, dealing with rabbinical Jewish lineages. And it says another three lineages, or nearly 1/4 of them, 23.1%, belong to the E-M35/E-L117 haplogroup. E-L117 is the previous haplogroup classification for E-M35. This is right in the middle of the range of 15 through 30% that has been cited as the percentage of all Jewish males who belong to the E1B1B-E-M35 haplogroup. And so here is a chart showing Ethiopian Semitic speakers and Ethiopian Jews. A lot of them have different branches of haplogroup E. Here are all the sources, by the way. And so here is a source dealing with Jews and haplogroup E as well. All paternal descendants of the Withnerum Garithman rabbinical lineage share the L117 SNP of Y DNA haplogroup E, previously described as E-M35. E-M35, 1, and E1B1B1 in the literature. Y DNA characteristic that all descendants of the Garithman rabbinical lineage share is that they all belong to the E-L117 haplogroup. And this, by the way, is talking about a rabbinic family with a very famous, prominent rabbinic family with haplogroup E. And it says, according to the International Society of Genetic Genealogy, ISOGG, and National Geographic's Genographic Project, E1B1B1 may have arisen instead in the Near East or the Middle East and then expanded into the Mediterranean with the spread of agriculture. Haplogroup E-M35, which accounts for approximately 18 to 20% of Ashkenazi and 8.6% to 30% of Sephardi Y chromosomes, appears to be one of the major founding lineages of the Jewish population. It is the most prevalent haplogroup among the Jewish population outside of haplogroup J. Samaritan communities have traditions of descending from the tribe of Levi, suggesting that the E1B1B1 men claiming to be Levites may have existed in Israel before the diaspora of 70 AD. And so the priestly Kohen lineage from the tribe of Levi actually have haplogroup E. And so it says, however, the biggest and most important Samaritan family, the Kohen family, tradition, tribe of Levi, was found to belong to haplogroup E. This article predated the change of the classification of haplogroup E3B1-M78 to E3B1A-M78 and the further subdivision of E3B1A-M78 into 6 subclades based on the research of Cernuni. And so this is very interesting because we know Levi comes from Jacob and then from Isaac to Abraham, so them having E is very interesting. Samaritan Levites specifically have haplogroup E up to 100%. Here are all the references, by the way. And just to talk about other Semitic populations, Arabs in Egypt also have haplogroup E up to 30 to 62%. And Arabs in Palestine, like the Christian ones, have haplogroup E up to 30%, as well as Arabs in the Jordan near the Dead Sea have 30%. So it's very interesting. So E-M78 was a major founding lineage of West Semitic people and northern Egyptian lower classes, slaves, workers, and shepherds. E-M78 is an indicator of a second wave of out of Africa of Proto-Semitic people during the early Bronze Age. This most definitely was not just one haplogroup, but included many. Y-DNA E-M78 is a good migration indicator for this second wave. A significant majority of Jewish families with tradition of descent from King David are found in E-M78, a lineage that underwent a severe ancient extinction event in the conquest, exilic, and Roman periods. History indicates that there would likely have been very few survivors of this lineage, but a discussion that belongs to a different thread, though. So here is a paper actually dealing with this. People who have lineage from King David, who claim lineage from King David with haplogroup E. This is from Why DNA Research Studies of Rabbinical Lineages and Their Importance to the Jewish Genealogy by Dr. Jeffrey Mark Paul. And it says the Loria rabbinical lineage has one of the oldest family trees in the world. It's very powerful. The Loria rabbinical lineage has one of the oldest family trees in the world, claiming to trace back at least to King David, born in 1037 BCE. The first Loria in the lineage was Rabbi Aaron Loria, 14 through 1480, who married Miriam Spinria, the daughter of Rabbi Shlomo Spinria, the founder of the Shlomo rabbinical lineage. Forgive me for my mispronunciations. We tested two pedigreed paternal descendants of the Loria rabbinical lineage, whose common ancestor was Rabbi Jacob Aaron Loria of Makoville, 1753 through 1788. The predicted haplogroup to which the two pedigreed Loria descendants belong to E-M35. The confirmed haplogroup is awaiting the results of the big Y-700 test. The previous nomenclature for this haplogroup, E1B1B1, was cited for Loria descendants of Rabbi Jokel Loria, 1435 through 1490. The two Loria descendants have an average of 29 genetic matches at 37 STR markers, representing 21 different surnames from geologically relevant genetic matches, 34-37 STR markers. The 95% probability predicted for the TMRCA is within 8 generations. So this is very powerful. We have one of the oldest rabbinical lineages who claim descent from King David with haplogroup E. So, and they have the oldest family tree. It's very interesting. So here is so this is why haplogroup E it's a very high probability that the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, would have had it. Haplogroup E, after all, is an Afro-Asiatic Semitic marker. The Israelites and their ancestors are an Afro-Asiatic Semitic people. Remember, they are Semitic, they are Afro-Asiatic. The Israelites, the Hebrews, they are a Semitic-speaking people of the Iron Age in the ancient Near East. And remember what Peter Solomon says about haplogroup E. In this group, many of us conclude that haplogroup E is one of the major founding haplogroups of the Semitic people, and that haplogroup E people were the ones who brought Proto-Semitic language out of Africa, out of the Afro-Asiatic homeland in Northeast Africa into the Levant and Mesopotamia. So, what about the matriarchs? In order to understand the mitochondrial DNA of the matriarchs, I believe it's best to go back to Eber and Uzurad. Uzurad was the daughter of Nimrod, and Nimrod was the son of Cush, and Cush was the son of Ham. Cushites from the lineage of Cush, son of Ham, would be the Nilo-Saharans and the Nilotic people. These people typically have mitochondrial haplogroup L. mtDNA haplogroup L2 was found in Syria, around the region that the matriarchs lived. Remember, Book of Jubilees, chapter 8, verse 9 through 10, Eber, and he took unto himself a wife, and her name was Azurad, the daughter of Nimrod. She bare him a son, and called his name Peleg. And here's the genealogy showing it. Go from Shem to Arphaxad to Canaan to Shelah to Eber, and then from Ham to Cush to Nimrod to Azurad. And they kind of come together at this point, Shem and Ham. And the Book of Jubilees mentions that the name Nimrod, the Greek form of Nimrod, only as being the father of Azurad, the wife of Eber, the mother of Peleg, who Abraham would descend from. This would thus make Nimrod an ancestor of Abraham, and hence all Hebrews. And this would be from the maternal lineage, by the way. And Cush begot Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one on the earth. That's Genesis chapter 10, verse 8. And so when it comes to Cush, son of Ham, his descendants would have settled in the southern part of the Nile Valley. When it comes to Cush, this would be your Proto-Nilotic people. A Proto-Nilotic unity separate from an early undifferentiated Eastern Sudanic unity is assumed to have emerged by the 3rd millennium BC. The Eastern Sudanic unity must have been considerably earlier still, perhaps around the 5th millennium BC. The original locus of the early Nilotic speakers was presumably east of the Nile in what is now South Sudan. The Proto-Nilots of the 3rd millennium BC were pastoralists, while their neighbors, the Proto-Central Sudanic peoples, were mostly agriculturalists. Nilotic people practiced a mixed economy of cattle pastoralism, fishing, and seed cultivation. Genetic and linguistic studies have demonstrated that Nubian people in southern Sudan and southern Egypt are a admixed group that started off as a population closely related to Nilotic people. Nubians are considered to be descendants of the early inhabitants of the Nile Valley, whom later formed the Kingdom of Cush, which included Kerma and Meroe, and the medieval Christian kingdoms of Maquirida, Nobotia, and Almada. These studies suggest that populations closely related to Nilotic people long inhabited the Nile Valley as far as southern Egypt in antiquity. And just for phenotype, Nilotic people, when it comes to Nilotic people, they are the specialized African type, native to the swamps and savannas of the Upper Nile region of South Sudan and adjacent countries. With their black skin, they belong to the darkest people on earth. Heads are long, facial features coarse with a rather broad nose, full lips, and kinky hair. Nilots seem to be a relatively old group that might have extended further east into Ethiopia during prehistoric periods. And I would say that from a paternal lineage, Nilots would be haplogroup A, which is still seen in Sudan, ancient land of Kush, to this day. So when it comes to mitochondrial DNA, they typically are haplogroup L. And mtDNA study by Castry in 2008 examined the maternal ancestry of various Nilotic populations in Kenya and Turkania, Samburia, Maasai, and Luau individuals sampled. The mtDNA of almost all of the tested Nilots belong to various sub-Saharan microhaplogroup L subclades, including L0, L2, L3, L4, and L5. And we find L2 in Syria, the exact same region where the matriarchs come from. Haplogroup L2A1 has been found in ancient fossils associated with the pre-pottery Neolithic culture at Tel Halel, Syria. A specimen excavated in the Savannah Pastoral Neolithic site in Luxman in Tanzania also carried the L2A1 clade. Admixture clustering analysis further indicated that the individual bore significant ancestry from the ancient Levant. Very interesting. So Isaac and Jacob married their cousins. That's one thing that's very interesting. That they actually did marry, relatives. So if the wives of Isaac and Jacob descend from Eber and Azurad, then it's highly likely that they could have had mitochondrial L2. So remember, Eber and Azurad got together. If Isaac and Jacob's wives also descend from Azurad, then she likely could have been, the wives of Isaac and Jacob could have likely been the exact same haplogroup as the Kushite lineage of Azurad. So here's just a visualization of this. Isaac marries Rebecca, first cousins once removed, and Rebekah and Jacob, their second cousins, Jacob, Leah, and Rachel, their second cousins once removed. And Abraham and Sarah, by the way, are half brother and half sister. So you basically do see a very homogeneous type of mixing among the descendants of Terah. Abraham getting with Sarah, and of course, Abraham's son Isaac getting with Rebekah, and then Jacob getting with Leah and Rachel. And if all these ladies descend from Eber and Azurad, specifically, Azurad, then they could have L markers. It's a high probability. And we do see L, like I said, in Syria. So what's interesting about this is that many Jewish groups specifically have this haplogroup L2A that was found in ancient Syria. L2A1 L2A is recognized as an Ashkenazic specific haplogroup seen among Ashkenazi Jews with ancestry in Central and Eastern Europe, where it is presumed to have come from Ashkenazi admixture. This paper, 60,000 years of interaction between Central and East Africa, documented by major African mitochondrial haplogroup L2. L2A1 is the most complex subclade within L2A, and it harbors lineages from all African regions as well as lineages from other continents, including non-African branches such as L2A, L21, L2A, connected to Ashkenazi Jewish diaspora. L2A1 has clearly a Western/Central African origin and distribution, with many subclades suggesting a recent Bantu migration southwards, and is hardly present in Eastern Africa. L2A11 displays a similar pattern in sub-Saharan Africa, but with a peculiarity of a sub-branch present in Ashkenazi Jews, L2A112A. The subclade L2A1 plus 143 shows several basal East African lineages together with Near Eastern and Arabian lineages that indicate a migration in the early Paleocene. That's very important. Comes to Azurat. The history of Slavic inferred from complex mitochondrial genomic sequences. And so this paper says haplogroup L2A is widespread within Africa. Both of them could have assigned to the L2A1 L2A clade and located on the same branch with the Ashkenazi Jewish haplotype. The L2A1 haplotypes are observed in Germany, Romania, France, Russia, and Poland, as L2A haplotypes were reported in Ashkenazi Jewish populations. The samples representing haplogroup L2A1 L2A might be further evidence of the occurrence of Ashkenazi Jews mitochondrial mtDNAs in Polish mtDNA pool. But this is where we conclude our video. Shem to Abraham, the Patriarchs and the Matriarchs. The next episode is, what did Semites from Shem to Abraham look like? Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, share, click the bell, and I will have Q&As very soon on this channel, and I'll have all my social media apps in the about page of this YouTube channel. And for any questions or anything you might have, again, just leave it down below in the comment section. And have a great day. Shalom.